Title: The Inspiring Life Story of Princess Diana, a clear and slow English story for learners. Hello and welcome to this English learning story. Today, we will talk about the real life story of Princess Diana. This story is written in clear and slow English. It is perfect for learners who want to improve listening skills, vocabulary, and understanding of everyday expressions. The story is emotional, inspiring, and easy to follow. As you listen, try to notice new words. Repeat them. Use them in your own sentences. Remember, learning English is a journey. Stories make this journey natural and enjoyable. Now, let us begin the story of Princess Diana. A woman loved by millions, and remembered as the people's princess. Diana Frances Spencer, who later became known to the world as Princess Diana, was born on July 1, 1961, in a small English village called Sandringham. Her family lived on the royal estate, not far from the Queen's home. This meant that, even as a little girl, Diana grew up close to the royal family. But at that time, nobody could imagine that she would one day become the most famous woman in the world. Diana was the fourth of 5 children in the Spencer family. Her father was John Spencer, the Viscount Althorp, and her mother was Frances Roche. The Spencers were an old aristocratic family. That means they had a long history, money, and a high social position in England. They were not royal, but they were very close to the royal family. Diana's parents wanted a son to continue the family line. When Diana was born, they were a little disappointed because she was another daughter. This was painful for young Diana when she learned about it later. She often felt that she was not truly wanted or celebrated in the same way. This early sadness shaped part of her personality. She became sensitive, emotional, and always eager to love and to be loved. The house where Diana grew up was called Park House. It was large, old, and beautiful, surrounded by green gardens and wide fields. But despite the beauty of the place, Diana's childhood was not always happy. Her parents' marriage was full of problems. They argued a lot, and when Diana was only 8 years old, her mother left the family after a painful divorce. This was one of the first big emotional wounds in Diana's life. She missed her mother terribly. She sometimes cried at night and felt lonely, even in a big house. Her father cared for her, but he was a very traditional English man, serious, reserved, and not very open with feelings. Diana learned early to look for comfort in people who showed kindness. Diana was a shy child. She did not always do well in school, but she was full of imagination and feelings. She loved music, dancing, and taking care of animals. She had guinea pigs, rabbits, and even a pony. Her love for animals showed her gentle heart. She also loved to play with children younger than her, almost like a little mother. Even at a young age, people noticed that Diana had a special gift. She cared deeply for others. Teachers described her as kind but sometimes dreamy. She was not the best student in reading or writing, but she had a natural talent for sports, swimming, and ballet. In fact, ballet became her greatest passion as a child. She dreamed of being a ballerina and spent hours practicing in her room. Because her family lived close to the royal estate of Sandringham, Diana sometimes played with the young princes, Andrew and Edward, when she was little. She also saw Queen Elizabeth II and her family from time to time. To Diana, they were not magical figures yet, they were simply neighbors. But these early connections would later play a huge role in her destiny. When Diana's mother left, Diana stayed with her father. This was common at the time in aristocratic families. But the pain of losing her mother's daily presence stayed with her. As a teenager, Diana sometimes visited her mother in London, but the relationship remained complicated. Diana often said later in life that she felt insecure about love because of this early experience. She was afraid of being abandoned. This fear of being unloved pushed her, in adulthood, to always try harder to make others happy. She wanted to please, to care, and to give love to everyone around her. This made her extremely popular later as a princess, but it also made her vulnerable to sadness when her own needs were not met. Even as a young girl, Diana showed signs of being different. She was not only interested in clothes or parties, like many of her friends. She liked to read about people who helped others. She admired nurses, teachers, and people who cared for the poor. She dreamed of living a meaningful life. Diana once told a friend that she wanted to do something important with her life, something that made people feel better. At the time, it was only a dream. Nobody knew she would one day touch millions of hearts around the world. After the sadness of her parents' divorce, Diana tried to focus on the good things in her life. She was a girl who always dreamed about something bigger than herself. Even though her family was wealthy and important in English society, Diana did not always feel confident or secure. Still, she carried with her a quiet dream, the dream of love, family, and a meaningful life. Diana's school years were not simple. She first attended Silfield Private School and then moved to Riddlesworth Hall, a boarding school. Boarding school meant that she lived away from home, together with other students, sleeping in dormitories and following strict rules. At times, she felt lonely, but she also learned independence. Later, Diana studied at Westheath Girls' School in Kent. This was a respected school, but Diana was not the strongest student in academics. Her teachers noticed that she had trouble with some subjects, especially science and math. Sometimes she felt shy and unsure of her abilities. But her teachers and friends also noticed something very special, Diana's kindness. She always looked after younger students. If someone was homesick or crying, Diana would comfort them. She often gave away her sweets or shared her belongings to make others smile. Her school report once described her as a girl who thinks of others before herself. This habit of caring for others followed her all her life. It was part of her nature. From the time she was a little girl, Diana had one great passion: dance. She especially loved ballet. The beauty, the grace, the music, it all made her heart feel alive. When she danced, she forgot her worries. She felt free. She took lessons and practiced as much as she could. She dreamed of becoming a professional ballerina. But as she grew older, her height became a problem. At almost 1.78 meters, she was considered too tall to be a traditional ballerina. When she realized this, she was heartbroken. Still, Diana never gave up on dancing completely. Even as an adult, she continued to dance in private, sometimes surprising people with her talent. Later, as a princess, she even performed a secret dance on stage as a gift for Prince Charles. For Diana, dance was not just a hobby. It was a way of expressing her emotions, her joy, and sometimes her pain. Alongside dance, Diana loved music. She played the piano and enjoyed listening to pop songs as well as classical pieces. She liked Elton John, Duran Duran, and other famous singers of her time. Music gave her energy, but it also helped her express feelings that she could not put into words. She also enjoyed drawing, painting, and creative activities. Although she did not become a professional artist, these hobbies showed her gentle imagination. Diana had an emotional and artistic spirit, something that later made her stand out in the royal family, where tradition and rules often left little space for creativity. From a young age, Diana dreamed of having a happy family of her own. She wanted to give her children the love and care she sometimes missed in her own childhood. She once told a friend that she wanted to be a dancer, a mother, and someone who helps others. Unlike many young aristocratic girls who thought mostly about fashion, parties, and social events, Diana thought a lot about relationships and love. She imagined a husband who would love her deeply and children she could raise with warmth and kindness. This dream of love and family was always in her heart. It made her very human, very relatable. People who met her often said she was different from other aristocratic young women, more humble, more caring, and more real. When Diana was 16, her father decided she should finish her education abroad. He sent her to a finishing school in Switzerland, called Institut Alpenweidmanet. A finishing school was not focused only on academics. It was also about learning social skills, languages, and preparing young women for society life. For Diana, Switzerland was exciting but also lonely. She was far away from home, in a different culture, learning French and other subjects. She sometimes wrote letters to her family, expressing how much she missed them. After some time, she decided that this type of education was not for her. She returned to England before completing the program. Even though she did not finish school with high marks or long certificates, Diana gained something more important: life experience. She understood what it felt like to be alone, to be independent, and to face challenges without family nearby. After Switzerland, Diana returned to London at the age of 17. This was a turning point in her life. For the first time, she lived in the city, away from her family home. She shared a flat with 3 friends in Coleherne Court, a fashionable area of London. Living in London was both fun and challenging. Diana now had to manage everyday life, shopping for groceries, cleaning, cooking, and paying bills. Even though she came from an aristocratic family, she learned to live simply, like any other young woman in the city. She also took several small jobs. She worked as a dance instructor for children, a nanny for young kids, and even as a cleaner for her sister's friends. This was unusual for someone of her background. Many aristocratic girls did not work at all, but Diana wanted to be independent and useful. These jobs showed her natural gift with children. She was patient, gentle, and playful. Children trusted her immediately. Parents also noticed her warmth and responsibility. Diana's love for children became one of the strongest qualities of her life. At this point, Diana was still just an ordinary young woman. She rode the bus, went shopping, and met friends for tea. She laughed, she cried, and she dreamed. She was not the best student, and she did not have a clear career path, but she carried with her the simple dream of being loved and building a meaningful life. Nobody knew that, very soon, Diana would meet Prince Charles, the future King of England. Their meeting would change not only Diana's life but also the history of the British royal family. For now, Diana was just Diana Spencer, a young girl with a gentle heart, a big smile, and dreams that reached far beyond her small London apartment. Diana's life in London was simple and ordinary. She lived with her friends, worked with children, and spent her free time dancing, listening to music, and dreaming about the future. She was cheerful, shy, and very young, just 18 years old. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. Prince Charles, the eldest son of Queen Elizabeth II, was already in his early 30s. As the heir to the British throne, he was expected to marry and have children. The royal family wanted him to find a suitable wife. The whole country was interested in who Charles would choose. Newspapers often wrote about him, showing pictures of him with different women. Charles was seen as serious, polite, and a little reserved. He loved classical music, polo, and painting. He also carried the heavy responsibility of being the future king. But as the years passed, people began to ask, when will Charles marry? Who will be his princess? The first connection between Diana and Charles came through her family. Diana's older sister, Lady Sarah Spencer, briefly dated Prince Charles in the late 1970s. Diana met Charles during this time, but only as her sister's boyfriend. She was just a teenager then and did not imagine anything romantic. Later, Sarah said jokingly that she introduced her younger sister to the prince, but she never thought Diana would one day marry him. In 1977, Diana saw Charles again at her family home, Althorpe, during a hunting weekend. Charles noticed her, but she was still too young. At that time, she was only 16, shy and full of dreams. It was not until 1980, a few years later, that Diana and Charles met again properly. This time, Diana was 18, cheerful and full of life. Charles had just lost a close friend in a terrible accident, and he was feeling lonely. Diana spoke to him kindly, telling him that she felt sorry for his loss. Her gentle words touched him. Charles remembered Diana's kindness and innocence. She seemed fresh, natural, and different from the women he usually met in royal circles. Many women around him were experienced, glamorous, and sometimes seen as unsuitable by the royal family. Diana, however, was young, aristocratic, and without scandal. For Diana, the attention from the prince felt like a fairy tale. She had grown up near the royal family, but now the idea that she could be close to Prince Charles was unbelievable. Like many young girls, she had imagined romance, love, and maybe even a prince in her future. When Charles began to show interest, Diana felt both excited and nervous. She was shy, but she also had a playful sense of humor. She made Charles laugh, something that people around him said did not happen often. Charles and Diana began to see more of each other. He invited her to special events, like polo matches. Diana watched him play, and she soon became the subject of newspaper attention. The press started asking, "Who is this young woman with Prince Charles?" At first, Diana tried to continue her normal life. She went to work, cleaned her flat, and looked after children, but it became harder and harder. Journalists followed her everywhere. Photographers waited outside her home. She was only 18, and suddenly she was in the spotlight of the whole world. Still, Diana was excited. She believed she had found love. She thought Charles was kind, gentle, and caring. She dreamed that he might one day ask her to marry him. By the end of 1980, the press was full of stories about Diana and Charles. The public was curious and excited. For many people, Diana looked like the perfect future princess, young, beautiful, kind, and from a respected family. However, there were also challenges. Diana was still very young and inexperienced in life. Charles was 12 years older, with more life experience and a heavy royal duty on his shoulders. Their personalities were very different. Diana was emotional and warm, while Charles was intellectual and reserved. But at that moment, the differences did not matter. The romance seemed magical. In early 1981, Charles decided to propose. The royal family supported the match. They believed Diana was a suitable bride, noble, innocent, and without controversy. Charles invited Diana to Windsor Castle, where he asked her to marry him. Diana was shocked, happy, and overwhelmed. She accepted immediately, without hesitation. For her, it was like a dream come true. The chance to marry a prince and become part of a fairy tale. But there was something unusual. After Diana said yes, Charles famously told her, "Whatever love means." These words would later become very famous and troubling. They showed that perhaps Charles was not fully in love, or at least not in the same way Diana was. At the time, however, Diana was too young and too in love to notice. On February 24, 1981, the engagement of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer was officially announced to the world. Diana appeared in front of cameras wearing a beautiful blue suit and showing her sapphire engagement ring, surrounded by diamonds. The ring was not custom-made but chosen from a jeweler's catalog. Still, it became iconic and later was worn by her son Prince William's wife, Kate Middleton. The photographs of Diana and Charles smiling together spread across the globe. The media called her Shy D because she often looked down and blushed in front of the cameras. People found her natural and charming. The whole country, and soon the whole world, was excited about the royal wedding. It was described as a modern fairy tale, a young, ordinary girl marrying a real-life prince. For Diana, it felt like the fulfillment of her deepest childhood dream. She had found love, or so she believed, and she was about to enter the royal family. She imagined a future full of happiness, children, and romance. What she did not know was that the fairy tale would be much more complicated than she expected. The attention of the media, the strict rules of royal life, and the differences between her and Charles would all create struggles she could not yet imagine. But in the early months of 1981, the world only saw joy, beauty, and romance. Diana was about to become a princess, and the world was ready to celebrate her. The year was 1981, and the whole world was waiting for what people called the wedding of the century. Diana Spencer, a shy 20-year-old young woman, was about to marry Prince Charles, the heir to the British throne. Newspapers, television, and radio stations all around the globe were full of stories, pictures, and excitement. It felt like a real-life fairy tale. After the engagement was announced in February, Diana's life changed completely. She moved out of her London flat and into Clarence House, the official residence of the Queen Mother. This was a huge step. She had to leave behind her normal life with friends and step into the royal world of rules, traditions, and strict expectations. Diana also began to prepare for her new role as a princess. She had lessons in history, etiquette, the rules of polite behavior, and even how to behave in public ceremonies. She was taught how to greet people, how to sit, how to speak to leaders, and even how to wave in the royal style. She was excited but also nervous. She once admitted to friends that she felt like she was stepping into a new world that was much bigger than herself. One of the most famous parts of the wedding was Diana's dress. It was designed by David and Elizabeth Emanuel, young British designers who wanted to create something unforgettable. The dress was made of ivory silk taffeta and antique lace. It had large, puffy sleeves, a fitted bodice, and a dramatic skirt. The most breathtaking part was the 25-foot, 7.6 meters, long train, which became the longest in royal history. The dress also included hand-sewn sequins and 10,000 tiny pearls. On her wedding day, Diana looked like a true princess from a fairy tale. The image of her in that dress remains one of the most famous pictures of the 20th century. The wedding took place on July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Usually, royal weddings were held at Westminster Abbey, but St. Paul's was chosen because it was bigger and could hold more guests. The event was massive. Around 3,500 people were inside the cathedral, including kings, queens, presidents, and prime ministers from around the world. Outside, hundreds of thousands of people lined the streets of London, waving flags and cheering. An estimated 750 million people watched the wedding live on television, making it one of the most watched events in history. The whole world stopped to see Diana walk down the aisle. For many people, it felt like a dream, a young, shy girl marrying a prince in a fairy tale setting. When Diana stepped out of her carriage and appeared in front of the cathedral, the crowd gasped. She looked radiant, nervous, and beautiful. Her dress, with its huge train, spread across the steps behind her. Her veil covered her face, and her father walked proudly beside her. As she entered the cathedral, the long train of her gown followed dramatically behind. People around the world were glued to their screens, watching every step she took. The wedding ceremony was traditional and grand. The Archbishop of Canterbury led the service. When it came time to say the vows, Diana made a small mistake. She accidentally mixed up the order of Charles's names. Instead of saying Charles Philip Arthur George, she said Philip Charles Arthur George. The mistake made her even more relatable and loved, because it showed her humanity and nervousness. Another detail caught public attention. Diana chose to leave out the word obey from her vows, a choice that was unusual at the time. Instead, she promised to love, comfort, honor, and keep her husband. This small change showed her independent spirit, even within a traditional ceremony. When the vows were complete, Diana and Charles were officially husband and wife. The crowd erupted with cheers, and church bells rang out across London. Around the world, people celebrated Diana and Charles's marriage. Newspapers described it as a fairy tale come true. Diana instantly became a global star. She was young, beautiful, and seemed to bring a fresh, modern spirit to the royal family. People admired her natural charm and kindness. They loved that she was not a distant or cold figure, but a shy, warm young woman who seemed real. In the days after the wedding, Diana's picture appeared on magazines, newspapers, and television everywhere. On the outside, it seemed perfect. But for Diana, the day was both magical and overwhelming. She was only 20 years old, and she had just married into one of the most powerful and traditional families in the world. She later admitted that she felt lonely and unprepared, even on her wedding day. She was nervous about her new responsibilities, and she already had worries about Charles's feelings for her. Still, she hoped with all her heart that their marriage would be happy and full of love. After the wedding, Diana officially became Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales. Her life would never again be ordinary. She now had royal duties, public responsibilities, and the constant attention of the media. Diana wanted to be a good wife and a good princess. She threw herself into her new role with energy, trying to learn and adapt as quickly as possible. The world was watching. The fairy tale had begun. But, as time would show, fairy tales are often more complicated than they seem. After the wedding, Diana's new life began. She was no longer Diana Spencer, the shy young girl from Park House. She was now Diana, Princess of Wales, one of the most famous women in the world. Her picture appeared on magazine covers across the globe. Everywhere she went, crowds gathered to see her smile, to hear her words, and to feel her warmth. But fame was not easy. While the world saw a beautiful fairy tale, Diana's personal life quickly became more complicated. As Princess of Wales, Diana had many royal duties. She attended state dinners, visited hospitals, opened schools, and traveled with Prince Charles on official tours. In public, Diana was graceful and charming. She shook hands, smiled warmly, and spoke kindly to everyone, from world leaders to ordinary people. Unlike some royals who kept their distance, Diana made eye contact, touched people gently, and listened with full attention. This made people feel valued and respected. She soon became known as the People's Princess, because she connected so deeply with ordinary citizens. However, behind closed doors, Diana sometimes felt overwhelmed. The royal family had many strict rules, and life inside the palace was very formal. Diana was young, emotional, and sensitive. She wanted warmth and affection, but often she found the royal environment cold and distant. On June 21, 1982, Diana gave birth to her first child, Prince William Arthur Philip Louis, at St. Mary's Hospital in London. This was a historic moment, but also a deeply personal joy for Diana. She was only 20 years old when she became a mother. For Diana, holding her newborn baby was the happiest moment of her life. She felt an instant connection and love that she had never felt before. Diana wanted to raise William differently from traditional royal customs. Instead of letting nannies take full care of him, she chose to be present in his daily life. She read to him, played with him on the floor, and hugged him often. She wanted William to grow up knowing he was deeply loved. One of the first signs of Diana's independence was her decision to give birth in a hospital instead of the palace. This was new for the royal family. It showed her desire to live more like ordinary people, and it made her even more popular with the public. Diana did not want her children to live behind palace walls. She wanted them to see the real world. She took William on fun outings, to amusement parks, McDonald's, and even on buses. She believed that being a prince should not mean losing a normal childhood. Later, when her second son, Prince Harry, was born on September 15, 1984, Diana gave the same love and care. She was devoted to her boys. She often said, "I live for my sons. I would be lost without them." Her warmth as a mother touched millions of people. Photographs of Diana hugging her children became iconic. Many said she redefined what it meant to be a royal mother. While Diana's love for her children grew stronger, her marriage to Prince Charles grew weaker. Their personalities were very different. Diana was emotional, spontaneous, and playful. Charles was serious, reserved, and often busy with his royal duties. Diana also felt that Charles did not give her the love and attention she longed for. Rumors of his continuing closeness with Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman Charles had loved before marrying Diana, hurt her deeply. In public, Diana and Charles appeared as a happy couple. But in private, Diana felt lonely, rejected, and insecure. She tried her best to be the perfect wife, but her heart often felt empty. As the marriage grew colder, something surprising happened. Diana's popularity grew stronger. Everywhere she went, people adored her. Crowds cheered her name, children ran to her, and cameras loved her smile. She had a natural ability to connect with people, especially those who were sick, poor, or suffering. She visited hospitals and held the hands of patients. She sat on the floor with children. She showed compassion in a way that seemed unusual for royalty. People around the world admired her openness and humanity. This growing popularity sometimes made Charles uncomfortable. He was the heir to the throne, but often it was Diana who captured the spotlight. This created tension between them. Behind her warm public image, Diana faced deep personal struggles. She felt pressure from the constant attention of the media. Paparazzi followed her everywhere, even when she went shopping or tried to relax with her children. She once said, "Any sane person would have gone mad if they were followed like that." She also struggled with her self-image. Diana suffered from bulimia, an eating disorder. She admitted later that she often felt lonely, unloved, and not good enough. Food became a way for her to cope with her emotions. But despite her pain, Diana kept smiling for the public. She did not want people to see her sadness. She wanted to appear strong, even when her heart was breaking. Through all of her struggles, one thing remained constant: Diana's love for William and Harry. She called them her greatest treasures and always put them first. When she traveled abroad, she often brought them with her. When she had official duties, she returned home quickly to spend time with them. She once said, "I don't want my children to grow up in an ivory tower. I want them to see the world." Her natural, affectionate approach to motherhood touched millions. She became not only a princess, but also a role model for mothers everywhere. By the mid-1980s, Diana was one of the most famous women in the world. She was admired as a fashion icon, a loving mother, and a compassionate princess. Yet inside, her life was full of contradictions: joy with her children, sadness in her marriage, and pressure from the media. The fairy tale wedding had led to a complicated reality. Diana was no longer just a shy girl from Norfolk, she was a global figure. But behind her gentle smile, she carried both love and pain. Her journey as a princess and mother was only beginning, and the years ahead would bring even greater challenges. By the late 1980s, the fairy tale image of Diana's marriage was beginning to fade. To the public, she was still the beautiful and beloved Princess of Wales. But behind palace walls, Diana's life was filled with pain, confusion, and heartbreak. At first, Diana hoped her marriage to Prince Charles would be full of love and understanding. She believed in romance and wanted a close, supportive relationship. But as time passed, she realized that Charles's heart was not fully hers. Charles continued his close friendship with Camilla Parker Bowles, a woman he had known long before Diana. For Diana, this was devastating. She once said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." This growing distance made Diana feel unwanted and unloved. She tried to please Charles, but nothing seemed enough. While Diana's marriage was struggling, the world's fascination with her grew stronger. Paparazzi followed her everywhere: when she went shopping, when she took her children to school, even when she was on holiday. The cameras never left her. She could not escape the flashing lights, the shouting voices, and the endless headlines. Sometimes, dozens of photographers surrounded her car, making it difficult for her to move freely. Diana once said she felt like she was living under a glass dome, where everyone could see her but nobody truly understood her. Ironically, while her marriage was weakening, her popularity with the public was soaring. People loved her kindness, her honesty, and her humanity. She was not afraid to hug children, touch patients, or show her emotions. In 1987, Diana made international headlines when she shook hands with an AIDS patient without wearing gloves. At that time, many people were afraid of the disease, and even doctors kept their distance. But Diana wanted to break the stigma. She showed the world that compassion was more powerful than fear. Moments like this made her even more admired around the world. She was no longer just a princess in a palace, she was a symbol of love and hope. Behind her public smile, Diana was fighting private battles. She openly admitted later that she suffered from bulimia nervosa, an eating disorder. She used food as a way to cope with stress, sadness, and feelings of rejection. She also struggled with depression and loneliness. She once described herself as desperate and crying out for help. Diana's vulnerability made her very human. She was not a perfect princess living a perfect life. She was a woman who felt pain, just like everyone else. And that honesty made people love her even more. By the early 1990s, it became clear that Diana and Charles's marriage was in serious trouble. The couple appeared together in public, but their smiles often looked forced. Behind the scenes, arguments and misunderstandings were common. Rumors of Charles's relationship with Camilla grew louder, and soon, private phone conversations were leaked to the media. The British press gave them nicknames, Camillagate and Squidgegate, and the scandals embarrassed the royal family. At the same time, Diana was linked to her own friendships and rumored romances. Whether true or not, these stories fed the newspapers every day. The royal couple was no longer a symbol of fairy tale love. They had become a symbol of royal conflict. In December 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced to Parliament that Prince Charles and Princess Diana had officially separated. They would no longer live together as husband and wife, but they were not yet divorced. The news shocked the world. Millions of people who had watched their wedding on television now saw their fairy tale collapse. For Diana, it was painful but also a relief. She no longer had to pretend in public that everything was perfect. Even after the separation, Diana continued her royal duties. She visited charities, hospitals, and children's homes. She wanted to use her position to do good, even as her marriage was falling apart. In 1995, Diana gave a shocking interview on the BBC programme Panorama. In this interview, she spoke openly about her struggles, her marriage, and her pain. She admitted to her eating disorder, her depression, and her feelings of betrayal. When asked about Camilla, she replied with the famous words, "Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The interview made headlines around the world. Some praised Diana for her honesty, while others criticized her for speaking so openly about the royal family. But one thing was certain, she had captured the world's attention once again. After years of separation, the marriage officially ended. On August 28, 1996, Diana and Charles's divorce was finalized. As part of the settlement, Diana kept her title as Princess of Wales, but she was no longer allowed to use Her Royal Highness. Still, for millions of people, she remained Princess Diana. The divorce was painful, but it also gave Diana freedom. She was no longer tied to the strict rules of royal life. She was free to raise her children in her own way and to focus on the humanitarian causes that mattered to her. After the divorce, Diana began to rediscover herself. She no longer had to play the role of the perfect royal wife. She could be simply Diana, a mother, a woman, and a humanitarian. She used her fame to bring attention to important issues, such as homelessness, landmines, and AIDS awareness. She traveled, she spoke, and she continued to touch hearts around the world. Though her marriage had ended, her journey as a global icon was only beginning. The story of Diana's marriage was full of love, hope, betrayal, and sadness. For many, it was a reminder that fairy tales are not always real. Behind the glamour and the crowns, Diana was a woman who wanted love and kindness. Her struggles made her human. Her courage made her extraordinary. And her divorce marked not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new and powerful chapter in her life. After her divorce in 1996, Diana was no longer bound by the strict rules of the royal household. For the first time in many years, she had the freedom to make her own choices. While she was no longer officially a senior member of the royal family, she remained one of the most famous women in the world. And Diana decided to use that fame for a greater purpose, to help those who were suffering and forgotten. Diana had always been known for her compassion. Even during her marriage, she visited hospitals, hugged children, and spoke to people who were often ignored by society. But after the divorce, she dedicated herself even more fully to humanitarian work. She became a patron of many charities, working with organizations that supported the homeless, the sick, and people living in poverty. What made Diana unique was her ability to connect with individuals on a deeply personal level. She did not just attend events or cut ribbons, she held hands, sat down on the floor, and listened with real interest. Her warmth and genuine concern made people feel seen and valued. She once said, "Carry out a random act of kindness, with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you." One of Diana's most groundbreaking contributions was her work with AIDS patients. In the 1980s and 1990s, AIDS was surrounded by fear and misinformation. Many people believed it could be spread through touch, and patients often faced rejection and isolation. In 1987, Diana visited an AIDS hospital in London. Cameras captured the moment she shook hands with a patient, without wearing gloves. That simple act changed public opinion around the world. It showed that compassion was stronger than fear. Diana continued to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS, speaking out at conferences, meeting with patients, and bringing global attention to the crisis. She helped break down barriers of ignorance and prejudice, and she gave courage to thousands of people who felt abandoned. Another important cause that Diana embraced was the campaign to ban landmines. Landmines are explosives hidden in the ground, often left behind after wars. They remain dangerous for years, killing or injuring innocent civilians, especially children. In January 1997, Diana visited Angola, a country devastated by war. Wearing a protective visor and vest, she walked across a cleared minefield. The images of her doing so were broadcast around the world. This powerful moment brought enormous attention to the issue of landmines. Diana met survivors, listened to their stories, and highlighted the suffering of those living in fear of hidden bombs. Her advocacy helped inspire international support for the Ottawa Treaty, which banned the use of landmines. Although Diana had stepped away from official royal duties, she remained constantly in the spotlight. The paparazzi followed her everywhere, on holidays, at events, and even when she was spending time with her sons. In her personal life, Diana began new relationships, but the media often exaggerated or twisted the stories. She wanted to find love and happiness, but privacy was nearly impossible. Despite this, Diana focused on her role as a mother. William and Harry remained her greatest joy. She once said, "I want my boys to have an understanding of people's emotions, their insecurities, people's distress, and their hopes and dreams." She wanted them to live with kindness, humility, and empathy, values she modeled every day. 1997 was both a year of hope and tragedy for Diana. Her humanitarian work was receiving worldwide recognition, especially her campaign against landmines. She continued to travel, to speak, and to touch lives. But her personal life was under intense media scrutiny. Her every move was photographed, and her relationships were front-page news. Tragically, on August 31, 1997, Diana's life ended suddenly in a car accident in Paris. She was only 36 years old. The news shocked the world. People wept openly in the streets. Thousands of flowers were placed outside Kensington Palace, where she had lived. It was as if the world had lost not just a princess, but a friend. Even though Diana's life was cut short, her legacy remains powerful. She changed the way the world saw royalty, not as distant figures, but as people who could show warmth, touch hearts, and inspire change. Her compassion for AIDS patients, her bravery in walking through minefields, her dedication to children and the homeless, all of these actions left an unforgettable mark. Diana also transformed the role of women in the royal family. She showed that vulnerability could be a strength and that honesty could inspire millions. Her life was not perfect, but it was real. And that realness made her loved across the globe. Perhaps her greatest legacy lives on through her children, Prince William and Prince Harry. Both princes often speak about their mother's love and influence. They have continued her humanitarian spirit, supporting causes related to mental health, veterans, and children. They remember her as the mother who made them feel loved above all else. William once said, "She was very informal and really enjoyed the laughter and the fun. She understood that there was a real life outside of palace walls." Through her sons, Diana's values continue to inspire new generations. Today, Diana is remembered as the people's princess. She was elegant, beautiful, and kind, but most importantly, she was human. She showed the world that kindness and empathy can change lives. Her story is one of love and heartbreak, courage and vulnerability, fame and struggle. Though her life ended far too soon, her legacy of compassion and humanity will never be forgotten. Diana once said, "Everyone needs to be valued. Everyone has the potential to give something back, if only they had the chance." Her words and actions continue to remind us of the power of kindness. Princess Diana may no longer be with us, but the light she brought to the world still shines. And that brings us to the end of the story of Princess Diana, the people's princess. Her life was full of light and shadows, of love and pain, but above all, it was full of compassion. Diana showed the world that kindness and humanity are more powerful than crowns or titles. Even though her journey was short, her legacy continues to inspire millions across the world. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it not only improved your English but also touched your heart. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring English stories.